Hey everybody, welcome back to Trial and Error. Now this video is bound to get a few of you worked up because I'm going to give you some advice that is probably the opposite of what you've heard before. But my goal of the video isn't to get you worked up. I'm going to explain my position on it from my experience, why it makes more sense to change the oil in your seasonal stuff, whether it's a motorcycle, convertible, or a boat, or whatever it is. Do that stuff in the spring before you're going to use it, rather than to do it as one of the last steps of your fall winterizing. And again, not here to stir it up. I'm just gonna give you my perspective. So if you want, hear me out. If you still disagree with me after hearing it, throw it down in the comment section. Tell me why I'm an idiot. I'm totally okay with it and kind of used to it anyway. So with that, let's get into it. So let's start with the legacy approach of changing your oil in the fall as kind of one of your last steps at winterizing whatever it is that we're talking about. The thought process behind that, well, for one thing, it was grounded in much older oil technology. The oils that we have today it's a night and day difference in terms of being able to encapsulate things like fuel that washes down the cylinder walls, because your oil will pick up actual fuel in any gas engine over the span of its mileage. Other contaminants, just dirt, things like that. Yes, we have an oil filter, but that oil filter goes down to like 10 microns. There's stuff that is smaller than that. All of that stuff does get caught up in that oil. And the thought process is, well, you don't want that sitting in your engine over the span of the winter. So that theory there, that whole sitting in your engine thing, that's where I take issue number one with it. It's not sitting in your engine. It's sitting in your oil pan over the span of that winter. It's not going anywhere. Let's take a look at this LS that has been sitting on a test stand basically for a year, so not unlike a car that you just left in the garage, parked for 6 months or whatever it is, just sitting there. To somewhat prove a point here, I pulled the valve covers off of this engine a full year ago, and I've just let it sit. I threw a plastic cover over the whole thing, but it was wide open in the back, just a trash bag actually is what it was. And the point is I wanted to look at this a year later, and what do we see or not see with this old oil still sitting in here? You're not seeing corrosion, you're not seeing rust, because everything is still coated in that thin layer of oil. Now there may be some contaminants in that oil, for sure. It's used oil that's been sitting in here. But those contaminants are encapsulated in that oil, and the oil is still providing a barrier that the metal needs between the metal and the air to protect against corrosion, even with it open to, you know, the elements, temperature changes that happen in a garage and all of these things. Nothing bad is happening to this thing by it sitting here with old oil in it. And then the bulk of the oil obviously isn't even here. It's just coated this stuff. It's all just sitting in the pan, which it might as well be sitting in a jug. It's not going to hurt anything by sitting in the pan. So let's really think about the person that changes the oil in the fall and what that means. Change the oil, park the car, lets it sit. It's got the fresh oil in it. Again, everything gets coated again in oil, but as you saw, doesn't really make a difference whether it's old or new. There's no corrosion even on exposed metal with old oil. But at any rate, we've got all new oil in there. It's sitting there. All of it drains down to the pan. This is where it sits. You've got 5 quarts of oil sitting in your pan at the bottom here for the winter. Now during that winter, even if the car's in a garage, the temperature changes creates condensation. The moisture in the air creates condensation, especially as even a small change in the air temperature, because your block takes a lot longer to warm up and cool down than the air around it usually does. All of that creates condensation that is just constantly falling in, constantly falling down into that fresh oil that we have sitting in that pan. For those of you that are leaving your whatever it is outside, it is exacerbated by that heat. Hot and cold, freeze, thaw cycles, constantly creating moisture in that block. All of that's just running down and puddling in with your new oil that literally has no miles on it. So that by the time spring rolls around, the first time you fire that up feeling good that you did your fall oil change and we're running fresh oil, it's not fresh oil anymore. It's probably got it's probably got more water content in it than any other time of the year. It's that first time you fire it up in the spring with your fresh oil. That to me never made sense. I would much rather have my fresh oil sitting in its sealed bottle where it can't pick up additional moisture in the air. Here's what I do. Spring has arrived. I'm going to pull my Goldwing out next. I'm not going to start the engine though, because A, I don't want to run that old oil full of water in it through my new engine for any reason. I don't need to get it up to temp because gravity and time has done a better job of draining that engine all into the oil pan then no matter how hot you got that oil, it'll never do better than sitting there for 6 months, just draining with gravity on its own. I'm gonna get all of that oil out of there, never even give the engine a chance to have it repumped up, put fresh oil in it, and now I know no water in that oil, no contaminants, no miles are put on the old oil, good to go. It doesn't get any fresher for starting a new season than doing it that way. If you are religious about your approach to changing the oil in the fall, please don't take this video as an insult. It's not meant to be. From my mechanical experience over quite a few years now, and then doing things like this just to see what happens if you left an engine with old oil in it, untouched, but exposed it to the air for a worst case scenario. Is that old oil doing anything in there in the winter? No, it's just sitting on the metal, protecting it like it should. You just don't want to run it, because when it's running, that's when we're doing damage. When the cam's rotating, lobes, everything's friction surfaces, that's when it's important. If it's just sitting there for a winter, it doesn't matter what's sitting in the pan. You pull the oil out of it, it makes no difference to that engine. It's done its job. What we should be doing, in my opinion, is ensuring that the oil that we start with in the spring is clean, free of contaminants, free of water, and the only way to do that, aside from doing an oil change in the fall and in the spring, would be just to do it in the spring, do it once and be done with it. If you think I missed something on either side of the fence, if you can think of another benefit to doing it in the spring, or you totally disagree and think I'm an idiot for not doing it in the fall, feel free, share it down in the comment section. Let's be respectful if we can. Because again, I'm not out to say anybody's wrong by any means. I'm just giving you this from my perspective. Thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate it. As always, any questions, comments, concerns, or criticisms, throw them down in the comment section below me. Otherwise, everybody, have a great day.